Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to be talking about Nazism and nihilism and the correlations between the two, or more in my opinion, the lack thereof between the two. So, before I get into it, as you can see, I'm wearing my Joker makeup as I have on other videos on nihilism, and I think I'm going to keep doing that. I actually am going to be buying a Heath Ledger Joker suit pretty soon. I'm right now just kind of cobbled together my own one, but I think it'll look a little better once I get that with this makeup. But without any further ado, let's get into it. Um, I have studied Nazism quite a bit over the course of my life. Like a lot of people, the sheer horrificness of it is enough to attract just some attention from me. But also, I think, as Stephen Hicks said in his documentary that I attached below here, um, you need to understand Nazism because we learned in World War II you have the chance of either defeating Nazism on the battlefield or intellectually in the mind. And on the battlefield is very difficult. So I think it is very important to understand it so that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past, even if it was a terrible, terrible system. Of course, I'm also a nihilist, and Nietzsche is one of my main inspirations for that. And that is one reason why I also think it's necessary to separate these two ideologies off from each other because it's not unheard of that there are some similarities drawn between the two, even though I think they're overstated. But, some of the just right off the bat things that, kind of instantly connect the two ideologies by some people is that Nietzsche was, of course, German, as was Hitler. Hitler overtly referenced Nietzsche on some occasions. And Nietzsche's, I believe it was his niece, actually, was friends with Hitler and had her picture taken with him and tried to say that there was a connection between the two, or as his great niece or something. But bottom line is, I mean, what did she really know? I don't think she really understood what either of those ideologies were. But anyways, these are some of the reasons people have tried to group the two, as well as that Western powers, especially evangelicals and conservatives, tried to lump the two together, both during World War II and afterwards because of their willingness to try to demonize both of the two ideologies, but particularly to try to tie Nietzsche to Hitler. And however, while there are not many similarities, I hate to admit it, but there are a few. And as listed here by Stephen Hicks in his documentary, here's just to rattle off a few of them: collectivism, zero-sum conflict, irrationalism, pro-war, anti-democracy, anti-capitalism, and anti-liberal. Obviously, there's a lot of topics to cover there, and I can't, really go into each and every one of them. But I will go into just a couple of them. For example, zero-sum conflict. Technically, there is a similarity, but I think there's a huge difference there. Hitler and Mein Kampf, when I read it, he very much emphasized specifically just war, death, and fighting. He did not empathize with people in the hospital at the prisoner of war, at the World War I battlefield while he was in treatment at the hospital there. And he said that he wished the other prisoners would be sacrificed for the glory of the country, which is, pretty horrific. But that is totally different from anything I've read in Nietzsche's works thus far. While Nietzsche is very hard to understand, though, so sometimes it can be a little hard to know for certain what he's trying to get at. But his idea of zero-sum conflict was more of the pain and suffering we each endure in life that makes us our own best self. And sometimes that is pain and suffering, in conflict with others too, fighting, and sometimes even in wars. Which brings me to my next point on this list was that they're both pro-war. While Nietzsche, did not overtly condemn war as being pure evil, I would not say he necessarily condemned war and nationalism and, types of global conflicts either. I don't remember anything in the book that seemed to directly hint at that in any of the books that I've read of his, which I've read Human All Too Human and Will to Power and The Antichrist and Beyond Good and Evil. And while there are some, ways where I could see some people would think that he was not anti-war, it just wasn't the same as Hitler's, who just, glorified every war that Germany ever been in and promoted it as the means to solve all problems in the country and showed no regard for human life. There was just a very different tone in Mein Kampf. And the last one of these that I'll address is anti-capitalism. Hitler definitely was, at least some extent, anti-capitalist, even though he ended up in the short term siding with corporations and with a lot of the industries in Germany out of short-term beneficiality to his regime. I think he recognized the economy needed to stay strong, but the National Socialists were called such for a reason. They definitely did believe in socialism, particularly Joseph Goebbels, and they were not pro-free market people, even though since they're considered more of a right-wing ideology, right now they're usually lumped in with being more of a pro-capitalist system, but they were not. Nietzsche, it's a little harder to say on that for certain because, again, I don't remember anything that just overtly condemned capitalism as evil within his books. But I know he also, he kind of warned about socialist revolutions and collectivist revolutions that would happen in the 20th century. So I don't know that from that either, that doesn't sound like an anti-capitalist message. But, he never at the same time, it wasn't like reading Milton Friedman or Adam Smith where he just glowingly endorsed it and just talked about the wonders of the free market. So it's a little bit hard to say, I think, that he was just pure anti-capitalist. But those were just some of the similarities between the two. And like I said, I think they're a little bit overstated even in Stephen Hicks' documentary. But, now to get into some of the differences between the two, which is a lot more extensive. One was, of course, racism, the obvious and most, the most probably consequential. Hitler, of course, believed the German Aryan race was superior and above all others. Nietzsche did not believe such. He believed that the Übermann, as he called him, could be of any racial type, not just of the Aryan race. And, of course, Hitler believed that Übermann was a genetically engineered type of man, the perfectly bred Superman. The next is German culture is superior and highest according to Hitler. Nietzsche believed that German culture was degenerate. Hitler believed anti-Semitism was moral, obviously, and Nietzsche believed anti-Semitism was immoral. Hitler had a hatred of the Jews. Nietzsche praised the Jews. And last, and probably most importantly to me, was Hitler believed Christianity was different and superior to other religions, including Judaism. Nietzsche believed Judaism was the same, Christianity was the same, but more dangerous than Judaism. And I can confirm with you, as having read Antichrist, a whole book dedicated to his excoriating of the Christian religion, Nietzsche definitely believed that. In fact, he believed that to a greater extent than I or most other atheists do. He just absolutely ripped Christianity and all Christian values to an extent that was pretty phenomenal. But one other note on that I just like to throw in from my own personal experience of reading Mein Kampf, Hitler, in addition to referencing Christianity positively, very positively referenced Judaism, which, like I said, that is very, very interesting given how much he hated the Jewish race. In one of his quotes in the book, he said that, "I don't want my hatred of the Jewish race to be confused with my respect for the Judaist religion, which I have respect for and for its cultural values." Again, that's a butchered quote. Someday I'm going to have to put that up just to show you I'm not lying. But that stood out to me personally, and that's one thing I think Stephen Hicks did not cover in his documentary, which I thought was a little disappointing. But, those were some of the differences between the two, at least according to his documentary. And I think they do relatively well sum up what I've noticed to be the differences between those two ideologies. If I had to just really sum it up in a nutshell, what I've noticed between the two is extreme nationalism and extreme racism and extreme anti-Semitism overlie everything else about Hitler's ideology. I mean, there's many, many other facets to it than that. But, it's actually a lot easier to understand Hitler's ideas because when I read Mein Kampf, I mean, it's really simplistically read. It was like it was written by really like a teenager or something. You don't have to really think too hard to figure out what Hitler is trying to say in it. Nietzsche is, of course, 180 degrees the opposite. It is incredibly hard to understand what Nietzsche writes in his books, and oftentimes I have to go to other authors to get their interpretations of it as well, because I'm just a banker, I'm not a philosopher, so I can't always get a pure scoop on what I'm trying to get when I read Nietzsche. But Nietzsche, the number one things that he seemed to emphasize, of course, like with most nihilism, was perfecting one's own self and achieving power over oneself even if it was through conflict, even if it was through pain and suffering, and for society as well, even if it was through war, pain, and suffering. And so I think I could see how there would be some of those similarities between some of the war and pain and suffering that Hitler tried to emphasize in Mein Kampf. However, there's many differences, and also just because of the broad nature of nihilism being so open-ended, allowing for no absolute ideas or values or any absolute meaning, I think that opens up the door to a lot of different things, maybe, unfortunately, including some bad ideologies like Nazism. Though, like I said, I do not believe in any way it could be actually seen as a cause of Nazism, at least not directly. No more than it could be seen as a cause of any of the ideologies that sprung forward in the 20th and 21st century, though it may have been a contributing factor to it as it has to many others. But just to sum up my last point that I would make on this, to be blunt with you, I don't think we'd even be having this conversation if Nietzsche had been anything other than German, especially if he'd been Jewish. I don't think Hitler would have taken a word he said seriously. That was why Hitler always said he wouldn't take any of the Marxist theory seriously, is because, of course, Karl Marx was a Jew, and Trotsky, I believe, was a Jew, and a number of other Marxists were Jews. So that was one reason Hitler didn't take their ideas seriously. So, anyways, hopefully that summed it up the best I could on it. There's a lot more to say on this, and maybe someday I'll do a part 2 on this to go into the rest. But if you feel differently, feel free to share and tell me what you think in the comment section below. But otherwise, just like, share, subscribe, and see you next time. Bye.